It's May 10th, 1996. Base Camp, Mount Everest. Elevation, 17,600 feet. The air is thin enough to make your thoughts slow. Every breath delivers half the oxygen it would at sea level. Your body is already dying, slowly, quietly, the moment you arrive. This morning, 2 guided expeditions are preparing to push for the summit. 33 climbers in total. Some of them have trained for years. Some have paid $65,000 for the privilege of standing on the roof of the world. Some will never come back down. By nightfall, 8 people will be dead. The deadliest single day in the mountain's history. To understand what happened on Everest in May 1996, you need to understand 3 things: what the mountain actually is, who was on it that day, and the one decision made in the early afternoon, when everything was still salvageable, that sealed their fate. Because this wasn't just a story about altitude and weather. It was a story about egos, about money, about the commercialization of the world's most dangerous place, and about what happens when the margin for error is measured in minutes and someone runs out of them. To climb Everest, you don't just need courage. You need to survive what mountaineers call the death zone. Above 26,000 feet, the human body cannot acclimatize. It cannot recover. It can only deteriorate. Cells begin to die. Judgment falters. Climbers report hallucinations, euphoria, paralysis. The brain starving for oxygen while convincing itself everything is fine. Every hour spent above that altitude, your body is consuming itself to stay alive. The summit window is brutally narrow. Weather on Everest is stable for only a handful of days each May, before the summer monsoon arrives and shuts the mountain down entirely. Miss the window by a day, or get caught above the Hillary Step when the weather turns, and the mountain decides the rest. For most of the 20th century, Everest belonged to elite national expeditions. Government-funded, military-trained. Years of preparation for a single attempt. The mountain was dangerous, exclusive, and largely inaccessible to anyone without institutional backing. Then the 1980s happened. Commercial guiding transformed Everest from a proving ground for elite alpinists into something closer to a destination. For the right price, a reasonably fit person with determination and money could attempt the highest point on Earth. You didn't need to be a world-class mountaineer. You needed a guide who was. By 1996, the price tag had reached $65,000 per client, roughly $130,000 in today's dollars. Expeditions ran like businesses, because they were businesses. The guides needed clients. The clients needed success. And success on Everest meant the summit. Rob Hall understood this better than almost anyone. A New Zealander from Christchurch, he had summited Everest 4 times and built adventure consultants into the most respected guiding operation on the mountain. His record was extraordinary. He had taken 39 clients to the summit without a single death. Hall was methodical, cautious, deeply professional. He believed the mountain could be managed, that with the right systems, the right team, and the right rules, risk could be controlled. One of his rules was absolute, a hard turnaround time. If you haven't reached the summit by 2 p.m., you turn around. No exceptions. The mountain doesn't care about your investment. It doesn't care how close you are. You turn around. Scott Fisher ran Mountain Madness, Hall's main competitor on the mountain that season. Where Hall was measured, Fisher was magnetic. A charismatic American from Seattle who'd made his name on bold, fast ascents. Fisher attracted a different kind of client. People drawn to his energy, his reputation, his confidence. He had summited Everest once before, without supplemental oxygen. He told people the mountain was being guided safely. He believed it. What Fisher didn't tell people, what he may not have fully acknowledged even to himself, was that he wasn't well. He had been fighting a chest infection for days. He was thinner than he should have been. He was pushing harder than his body could sustain. On the morning of May 10th, both teams began their summit push in darkness, headlamps cutting through air so cold it burned. 33 climbers moving upward, roped and silent, toward the highest point on Earth. Everything was still controllable. For now. The summit push began at midnight. Both teams left Camp 4 together, moving through darkness so complete that the world narrowed to the circle of light from each climber's headlamp. Temperature, -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind, manageable for now. The kind of conditions Everest sometimes offers as a quiet promise before it takes everything back. The plan was simple. Reach the summit by 2 p.m., turn around, be back at Camp 4 before dark. Simple plans rarely survive Everest. The first problem emerged before dawn. Fixed ropes, lines anchored into the mountain to help climbers move safely across the most exposed sections, hadn't been set above the balcony at 27,600 feet. It was a task that should have been completed the night before. It hadn't been. When the lead climbers reached those sections, they stopped. They waited. In the death zone, waiting costs oxygen. Waiting costs time. Waiting costs body heat you cannot recover. By the time the teams reached the Hillary Step, a 40-foot near-vertical rock face just 300 feet below the summit, the last major obstacle before the top, it was nearly 1 p.m. They were already behind. The mountain was already warning them. The Hillary Step created a bottleneck. One climber at a time. 33 people, one narrow passage, the summit almost close enough to touch. Some climbers later said they could feel the pull of it, that gravitational force that the summit exerts on exhausted minds. You've come this far. You've paid this much. You've suffered this long. The top is right there. Rob Hall's 2 p.m. turnaround rule dissolved in that moment for several climbers. They pushed past it. Hall himself pushed past it. He was watching his clients, making decisions in real time at an altitude where decisions are the hardest thing a human brain can produce. The last climbers reached the summit after 4 p.m. At almost exactly that moment, the storm arrived. It came faster than any forecast had suggested. A wall of cloud moving up the southern face, swallowing visibility in minutes. Temperature dropping, wind accelerating from manageable to survivable to lethal in the span of an hour. Climbers who had been standing on the summit of the world were suddenly unable to see their own hands. The descent in a whiteout at 29,000 feet is not a problem to be solved. It is a situation to be survived. Landmarks vanish. Direction becomes guesswork. The fixed ropes that are supposed to guide you down disappear into white. Your oxygen is running low. Your body is shutting down functions it considers non-essential. Your fingers stop feeling. Then, your feet. Several climbers became disoriented on the southeast ridge and wandered off route in the storm. A group of 5, including guides and clients from both teams, huddled together on an exposed section of the ridge at nearly 28,000 feet as the temperature plunged toward -60 with wind chill. They had no shelter, almost no oxygen. They waited for the storm to break, or for rescue that couldn't reach them in the dark. Scott Fisher was found alone on the mountain, barely conscious, too weak to move. His strength, the physical confidence that had defined him on every previous climb, had been drained by weeks of illness he had refused to acknowledge. A Sherpa stayed with him for hours before the cold made it impossible to survive any longer. Fisher died on the mountain before dawn. Rob Hall was with his client, Doug Hansen, near the south summit when the storm closed in. Hansen was exhausted, possibly snowblind, unable to descend on his own. Hall had reached the summit with him at 4 p.m., 2 hours past his own turnaround rule. Because Hansen had turned back the previous year just 300 feet from the top. Hall knew what that had cost him. He stayed. Through the night, Hall maintained radio contact with base camp. His team tried to coordinate a rescue. Fellow guide Gary Ball had descended safely. He relayed messages, kept Hall talking, kept him present. At one point, base camp patched through a satellite phone call from New Zealand. Hall's wife, Jan Arnold, was 7 months pregnant. She had summited Everest herself. She knew exactly what her husband's voice meant when she heard it. They spoke for several minutes. Hall told her he loved her. He told her about the baby. They had already chosen a name, Sarah. He told Jan not to worry. He spoke with the careful calm of a man who had already made his peace with what was happening and wanted her to eventually make hers. It was the last conversation they ever had. Doug Hansen's body was never recovered. Rob Hall was found the following spring, still on the mountain near the south summit. He had survived the night at 28,700 feet, one of the highest bivouacs in history. But hypothermia had taken him before rescuers could reach him. 8 people died on Everest between May 10th and 11th, 1996. It was the deadliest day the mountain had ever recorded. The mountain had offered a window. The window had closed, and everything that happened in between came down to minutes, and the decisions made in them. When the storm cleared on May 12th, the full scope of what had happened became impossible to ignore. 8 dead. Dozens more with frostbite severe enough to cost fingers, toes, hands. 2 of the most experienced high-altitude guides in the world. Gone. Clients who had paid for safety had instead witnessed something no amount of money could have prepared them for. The story reached the world fast. John Krakauer, a journalist and experienced climber, had been on Hall's team as a client writing a piece for Outside magazine. His account became the book Into Thin Air, published in 1997. It sold millions of copies and turned the 1996 disaster into the defining story of Everest commercialization. It also ignited fierce controversy. Other survivors disputed his account, his characterizations, his conclusions. The argument about what really happened on that mountain has never fully stopped. But the deeper question the disaster forced into public conversation had nothing to do with individual accounts. It was structural. Had the commercialization of Everest gone too far? Was it ethical to take paying clients, however fit, however motivated, into an environment where the margin between life and death could be measured in the minutes it took to clip a fixed rope? Where a guide's obligation to one client could cost another client their life? There were no clean answers. There still aren't. Rob Hall's daughter Sarah was born 4 months after his death. She has never met her father. Scott Fisher's 2 children grew up with his legend, the magnetic, fearless American who believed the mountain was manageable, right up until it wasn't. Today, Everest is more commercialized than ever. Some seasons see hundreds of climbers in a single summit window, queues forming on the Hillary Step like a slow-moving line. The record death tolls of 1996 have been surpassed in other years. The mountain keeps offering the window. People keep pushing past the turnaround. The mountain doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your investment, your training, your story, or your name. It just waits.